Thank you. Welcome everyone to the Environment and Sustainability Scrutiny Committee on the 22nd July. Before I introduce everyone in the room, I have some points to make about the run of the meeting, and I will read that from a script just to make sure that is correct. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Other Oh. You don't want to hear me twice, I tell you. Once is enough. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph, record our public meeting, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that anyone who intends to record the meeting can be made aware. We have no one from the public today, so I think that's probably a no. Please could attendees keep background noise to a minimum and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent, because it's important that with the recording quality that we maintain it and that contributions are clearly heard by those who are not in the room, even though we can hear them in the room. Thank you. In the room today to support our scrutiny, we have Councillor Peabody, Vice Chair, Councillor Thomas, Councillor Highfield and Councillor Davis. We also have two expert witnesses, which I'm very grateful for their attendance. One is Arthur Lee from the Herefordshire Local Access Forum, and one is Tom Fisher from Worcester Bromyard and Hereford Greenway CIC. We also have Councillor Philip Price, who's the Cabinet Lead for Transport Infrastructure. Thank you for coming today, Councillor Price. And we have two officers, Mark Avro and Ed Bradford. Thank you very much for attending. In the room to support us from Democratic Services, we have Simon, our clerk, and Joelle, who will be operating the live stream. We also have online our scrutiny officer, Daniel. Daniel, can you see and hear me?
Yes, I can, Chair.
Is your video working?
It is, but you don't want to see me right now, not very well.
I just want to know that you're there, Daniel. Okay. Thank you very much. Clark, apologies for absence?
No apologies.
No apologies. Substitutes?
No substitutes.
Any declarations of interest? None. Right. Our last meeting was an informal meeting, so the minutes that we're going to agree today are the minutes from the March meeting when we scrutinised the net zero ambitions of the county. Does committee members have any issues with the minutes, or are they happy for them to be signed off? Can we have a vote on that, please? Yeah. Okay, thanks. That's fine, Clark, that's signed off. We now come to public questions. We have one question, I believe, from a member of the public, and a response has been provided to that question on the website. We now have a written supplementary which the clerk is going to read out, and then I will ask Councillor Price to respond.
This is a supplementary question from Mr. Peter McKay of Leominster. The supplementary question is, I've worked through Leominster's list of anomalies on Town Council webpage, plus those on your own list, and have raised the attached draft action plan, expected to be on Town Council webpage shortly, aiming to address these in most efficient manner. I find they mostly, if not all, fall outside scope of your referenced guidance. Town Council has made representation to 2021-41 local plan place shaping consultation that these need to be corrected. Would you please review this, provide some feedback? Would it be included in the local plan, and would you discuss with Town Council?
Councillor Price.
Yes, thank you, Mr. McKay, for your question, or your supplementary question. It's quite complex, and actually, if we strip your question away into various bits, bit by bit, let's start with, would it be included in the local plan? Well, the local plan is likely to have significant change as a result of the change of government recently at the general election. We're not sure where that's going to take us. However, on the substance of the question, that will still remain whatever government is in place. So we'll just get that out of the way to start with. So the local plan isn't going to arrive any day soon, I suspect. I've looked through the list of actions, and it's fairly straightforward. However, it's like it's always has been the case about many of these powers. They, whether we are accepting as the Hereford Council the same place as Leominster Town Council is, I suspect that our officers will have to take it up with the Town Council as to whether or not some of these individual items are to be extinguished, as is the recommendation on some of them, re-recorded, committed to. So this is going to take quite a bit of time to work through, but I'm sure that our team will review these on the basis of what you've asked for, and there will be some feedback in due course, but it will take a little bit of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Questions from councillors, Clark?
No questions received
Okay.
from councillors.
Fine. We now move to the substantive item today, which is our scrutiny of the public rights of way and Greenway policy. I'm very grateful, as I said, for those that are in attendance today, particularly Arthur and Tom, because I do think that this is a major piece of infrastructure that I don't think has been scrutinised before, certainly not in my time. So while there is a structure that I will follow as chair in terms of the objectives I want to cover, I do want to have a fairly free and flowing debate, because I think it's essential that we as a committee have as much evidence as we can today in terms of coming to recommendations on what is really probably just about the biggest piece of infrastructure that the council has responsibility for. And with that in mind, Councillor Price, I want to start with the officers and ask a few factual questions, and then I'll open up the debate. Before I do that, I'll just mention what the 4 objectives are. The Scrutiny Committee wants to get a feel for what the scope of the network is, so we get an idea of what the challenges are, any specific features there might be as regards Herefordshire's own prow, and what that might mean in challenges. We also want to get an idea of the state of the network, and we want to look at whether anyone is monitoring that over time, and how that is actually faring over time, because I think that's quite a key issue as well, whether it's improving or whether it's deteriorating, because that is something that will obviously have to be addressed. The third area is around the model of policy development and operational delivery, and we'll explain later on when we get around to that. There are a number of sort of issues around that. Obviously, we have the council in the lead on that particular aspect, but we also have the local access forum. They have a legal sort of responsibility here. How well are we working in partnership with them? How well we are actually working in partnership with the parishes in order to actually have a holistic approach across the county to this. And therefore, when we talk about, oh, hello, Councillor Owens, if you take your seat. Okay, when we talk about the model of delivery and the model of policy development, we are talking about how we engage beyond the council, Councillor Price, with those partners and everything else. And the last objective we've got is one around Greenway policy, whether we have one, whether we should have one, what does it mean, and what does it hold for the future in terms of enhancing the network. Now, I don't apologise for starting with both you, Mark, and you, Ed, here as the officers. It's in the improvement plan, I know, and it's also in the report, and thank you for the report, by the way, in the appendices. Can you just cover, A, the size of this network, B, the 4 elements that make it up, and C, any specific features around the network in Herefordshire? For example, we are a river county. A bridge is a feature here. A bridge is an issue here. Is topography an issue here? So if we could just start the debate by, if you could just cover the size of the network, the various elements of the different paths within it, and any particular features that you as officers find challenging in terms of just dealing with it on a day-by-day basis. Which one you would like to take that, Tice? It's very important, Ed, because I think we've got to get the context right here for those who are viewing on the YouTube.
Do I need to use my mic or?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, thank you, Chair. So in terms of the network, in the report you'll see at points 2 and 3 that it sets out what the network comprises. So we've got public footpaths, bridleways, restricted byways, byways open to all traffic. So they're set out in Table 1. We basically got 3,483 kilometres of network. So to try and sort of put that into some sort of context, the roads that you drive on in and around the county, we have less of those than we do public rights of way network. So it is a huge network for us to look after. Obviously, the way we're sort of set up, where you talk about the challenges, the resources that we have to kind of deal with that. It's a challenge in terms of its size, its geography, being able to get out to everywhere. Obviously, some of those paths, locations will be remote, so trying to access them will bring their own challenges. But obviously, those are some of the benefits of them as well. In terms of that's what we like about the network. That's what people enjoy. And getting that access to the countryside. So. In terms of the elements, like I've said, we've got footpaths, bridleways, restricted byways, byways open to all traffic that we're maintaining. The vast majority are footpaths that we got, so over 3,000 kilometres are recorded as footpaths. In terms of challenges, I think it's fair to say you'll see further down in the report the reasons why some of the routes are currently closed at the moment. There's 29 that we've got recorded there as damaged bridges. That's something that we've probably, fair to say, sort of been looking at over the last few years in terms of how we deal with those. That comes with the investment that we're now getting into the network to try and address those issues. In terms of other challenges, I suppose, like I just touched on, the remoteness really of some of them getting out and about. We've got a couple of rights of way inspectors who are out on the network every day, picking up the inquiries that we receive. I also think one of the challenges is sort of the complexity of maybe the legal side of things when we're trying to deal with some of the issues that we face. I think that's probably a bit of a quick whistle stop tour. I don't know if there's anything Mark wants to add.
So Ed mentioned we've got 29 routes closed because of bridges. I think it's simply the nature of right-of-way network. You'll have bridges absolutely everywhere. So whilst we have the river running through the middle of the county, it's not necessarily the river that's causing us the problem. It's those discrete structures that maybe bridge a small stream somewhere. And as Ed said, once you've got those in the middle of literally nowhere, getting to actually maintain them, how they got to build them in the first place, I do not know. But getting to maintain them and build new ones in their place is also quite difficult. So that remoteness is always awkward. When I first started in local authority many years ago, rights-of-way teams were quite large. I think it's fair to say that we've got a very small, compact team that finds it difficult, certainly to walk 3,000 kilometres a year across that network to make sure they're all open would be very difficult. But there's acknowledgement there then that it's a revenue expenditure activity and revenue is difficult to come by.
Before I open up to a wider debate, I mean, we will all touch upon partnership as well later on because it shouldn't just be down to officers. Are there any special features in Herefordshire that apply to our network that does make it challenging, say, to other counties that have similar networks? This is what I'm trying to get at. Is there anything in terms of topography that makes it more difficult other than just the remoteness?
I'm going to say no, not really. Whilst Herefordshire a fairly hilly county, there are lots of other hilly counties around the country that will suffer the same problems. We have some issues with land stability, but other counties also have those same issues with land stability. So it's a bit like the normal highway network, the metal highway network. We all experience across England and the UK similar problems that occur simply because of the nature of investment cycles.
Thank you. Does any of the committee want to come in at that stage in terms of any? Yes, Councillor Highfield.
My apologies. You list the 4 different types of public rights of way, but there are also roads that look like tracks or footpaths, that are unmade roads that effectively are an access to the rural areas as well. So they're sort of almost like a fifth category. Just wanted to note that point.
But they're covered under the public highway, I assume?
So some of them will have traditional highway rights over them, but they may not be adopted. But if they're unmetalled, it's unlikely they're adopted. So they will have achieved rights over their period of time, which has meant they're open to everybody in the county to go and drive along, but they're just not metalled. We may not be the maintaining authority either for some of those roads as well. So it's just understanding where that difference lies in terms of who maintains and who doesn't.
Arthur, as a local access forum representative, do you want to say anything at this point about the size of the network and what that means in terms of your sort of role here?
Well, I think I fully agree with, we have more footpaths and rights of way than we have actual roads. So and I think it's important to the county for walking tourism that if we can encourage people to walk on open and usable paths, it brings all sorts of value and revenue to the county. People, if they come walking for the week, will book accommodation and stay in the county. If they're just coming for the day, they may well go to the pub or a local cafe for food and drink, or footpaths will take them past farms and that who have diversified with produce or craft things. So I think it's of great value to the county, and I always class it as walking tourism.
Thank you. Councillor Price, I'll bring you in at this point if you don't mind. We're getting a sense that this is even bigger than the road network. Do you think we give it enough priority within the executive at this time? Before we go on about the other aspects of it, I really do want to get a feel for what you think about that.
A direct answer is, I suspect we don't give it the priority that the size of it commands. However, the size of it is like everything else. Maybe it needs to be made more efficient. And if you look at the list of stuff that was on the question that Mr. McKay asked me, you know, most of those paths are an irrelevance. Most of them, some of them, depends who's looking at them. But from the point of view of what Arthur says about walking tourism, people don't want to be able to walk from here to that sign over there because it says there's a footpath on the map. If they can't go anywhere, when they get to the sign, then they've got to come back. What we need for walking tourism, in my view, is a place where people can come and they can do exactly what he just said, is we go out for the day, it's healthy, it's out in the open, we go from A to B and we pass by places where we can spend some money. That is what is an effective network. The fact that there's a path that goes off and it finishes up in a hedge, a ditch, or it disappears into the river, or you know, over time is changed, is something that we don't have the ability to do anything about anyway. So why don't we make it more efficient as a network and use our staff in a better way? I pose it to you to examine that, not to say that this is what you should or shouldn't do. It's just the fact that a lot of the footpaths are so little used, they are naturally overgrown. And if you look at this summer in particular, the growth of weeds, etc., has made many paths that people do walk on the odd occasion completely useless to go through because there's nobody to maintain it. So I pose you a question: is the network as it stands and as it is expected to be, is it viable, efficient, and should we consider change?
I'll bring Tom in first, and then Councillor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted first of all just to support what Arthur was just saying about tourism, because as one of my other hats, as well as responsibility for the Greenway, is I'm chair of Bromyard Walkers Welcome, and there are 4 Walkers Welcome towns in Herefordshire: Leominster, Ross-on-Wye, Kington, and Bromyard, and the aim of those organisations is to promote their town as a walking destination. And really, when it comes to looking at recommendations for this committee, there need to be closer links with these Walkers Welcome organisations, and better coordination between all the different volunteers, and broadening the point about tourism. The greenways are also extremely important in this way, where rural greenways have been opened up in other parts of the country. They brought in huge revenue to the local economies. So maybe we'll be discussing this later, but as part of the supporting tourism in Herefordshire, greenways have a huge role to play. Thank you.
Yes, at the risk of disagreeing with my friend Councillor Price, I don't think there's any such thing as a dead-end public footpath. They all go somewhere. Are they blocked because people don't use them, or are they not being used because they become blocked? And if when he suggests that perhaps some of them are not viable, and he mentions change, I think you probably know how incredibly difficult it is to ever close a public footpath. It's effectively impossible. They are there, and they will always be there, because it was a long fought battle to establish them in the first place, and the law is such that to actually underfootpath a track it's not even worth approaching that problem. So the real question is, do we neglect certain footpaths and maybe rely on volunteers to keep them open if they wish, or do we try to keep as many of them open as possible? And that is where the balance lies. Rather than change, it's just a matter of where we can afford to put our resources. And on that subject, we are on the same side. The resources are expensive and difficult, and some of these places are remote. It was great that we found an extra 250,000 to put into public rights of way this year to help fix those stiles and bridges that have failed. It's not enough, of course, to fix the whole lot, but it was a start, and it was a bit of progress. And just to move on a little bit, I'd just like to mention Arthur kindly appointed me as the chair of an enforcement subcommittee under the Local Access Forum, and Justine is on that committee too. We've had 3 meetings and a field visit so far. And I just wanted to look at these current workload being investigated by the team. And I'd like to draw your attention that there's 127 cases of willful obstruction on there. And if you look at PROW other enforcement issues, another 151, they're probably to do with obstruction caused by willful neglect rather than deliberate blocking. But altogether, that's quite a large category of our public rights of way that are, for one reason or another, blocked. And that is the concern. It was the concern of the LAF committee, and it's our concern of our subcommittee, that we didn't feel in the past that this was being moved on fast enough. There wasn't enough action being taken to, for example, make landowners spend their money, which they're supposed to do in many cases, to do some of the maintenance, because some of what goes wrong is the responsibility of the landowners. And they were not being required to get on and do what they were legally required to do. So the whole issue is complex and potentially expensive, and that I really get. But are we putting what resources we do have into these things as effectively and efficiently as we could? And that is, again, where I'm in agreement with Councillor Price. We need to be efficient with this. We need to find a way of making the best use of our resources, because it's unlikely that we'll be able to increase our resources. Thanks.
Before I bring Councillor Peverdy in and Councillor Thomas and Councillor Davis, these paths are in public ownership. I don't think we should forget that. They're not private. I've seen, even near me, paths that because they haven't been used for 20 years, the landowners have then taken it over. And I've seen a sign now that says private, keep out. And that annoys me every time I see that sign. Because I've been told, because I'm not a local, when I moved here, that was a public path down one side of the river at one stage, and we've lost it. So that is my concern here. These are publicly owned assets, and that's something we must bear in mind when we're having this debate. Councillor Peverdy, then Councillor Thomas, then Councillor Davis.
I think it's important to remember in our conversation the wider group of people that enjoy the Prow network. We all recognise how important it is for tourism and for the economy, but there are residents in Herefordshire who would just go up and down a path that doesn't necessarily go somewhere just to sort of manage their daily constitution. So I would agree that every single footpath has value to someone and is worth maintaining. So then there's the question of the huge responsibility and the lack of resources to maintain that network. And I think picking up on Councillor Highfield's point is we need to do more to make sure that landowners take responsibility for the things that they're responsible for. And much of that is to do with overgrown vegetation. So your point, Councillor Price, I think directs us to look at whether we do need to question whether the landowners are really taking their responsibility seriously. And the other very obvious thing is that we need a much wider group of volunteers who are out there incredibly willing to help, and we need to really enable them to help us support this network. And that's something that might come up. It was very welcome that the team appointed the volunteer coordinator, but 6 months into his job, the suggestion from some of the parish councils is that he's not getting the support he needs to actually carry out the work that he wants to do and is enthusiastic about doing. So I think we need to perhaps look at that as well.
Thank you.
I think the word is dichotomy, isn't it? I agree with Philip, and I agree with Arnie. Sorry, Councillor Highfield, nickname. I farmed up to, the first 40 years of my life, and all our footpaths on the farm, quite a few, I expect there were probably 2 miles of them, they either went to the church or they went to places of work. That's what they were formed for in the first place. Councillor Price is right. We have an awful lot of, like on my farm, there was 2 footpaths. Never in my life did anybody ever walk. They were free. They were open. There were styles they could get over. And I think it's a bit like churches. Within where I live, there are 6 churches. They can't all eventually stay open because we can't repair them all. And it's like footpaths. We cannot realistically keep them all maintained. We must concentrate on the ones that are important. Yes, 40 years ago I maintained all my footpaths. That was expected of me as a farmer, and we had 2 that went straight through the middle of fields. We still cut a path, which is obviously the easiest way because then walkers don't stray off all over the place if you cut a path. So I think we've got to have a little bit of another thing we're missing, I think, is our cooperation with parishes. Now I've got 9 parishes, but I've got summer groups, so I've got 5. And out of those 5, 4 have got very active footpath officers. And I think we have got, they tell me they're all getting frustrated, 2 of them, because, for example, as you've just quoted, bridges. They can't. A regularly well-used footpath is unavailable because there's no bridge. Again, you know, some of the old bridges were wonderful, but are we making them of the right materials to last? Because I know that sort of one footpath in Kingston, they've told me that it was only replaced 7 years ago, and now it's gone. That's no good, having something, you know, that lasts a very short time. So I think we've got to have some practical. Yes, they were hard fought, but we've got to be practical. We cannot maintain all 3,000 kilometres because it would take money from far, many people would say, more important things. So I think we've got to try to balance all this and make sure that all the regular footpaths, and the footpaths that go from A to B, one village to another, because these are the ones that are attracted to walkers, we must concentrate on those. And then if we get enough money, or the footpaths, parish council footpaths officer wants to open more, well, let them do it. But I think we've got to support them a little bit more. They do feel unsupported.
I mean, obviously we've got over 120 parishes, so we shouldn't forget that there is a resource out there and they're willing to do it. So that's something we need to concentrate on today. It's Councillor Davis next, then Councillor Peverdy, then I'm going to bring Arthur in after that.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to raise a question about the size of the network, and it's documented that we have approaching in or around 3,500 kilometres of prow within the county. Does that include everything on the definitive map, or there's an awful lot of the parishes I cover that have footpaths that aren't on the definitive map, and is this number we have of 3,500 actual defined paths, or is this the ones that are physically there? Because some aren't listed, and there is a backlog, I understand, of footpaths that are going through registration and what have you. So I just wanted to get a feeling for your thoughts on that, please.
Do you want to come in on this, Ed? Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you, Councillor Davis. So, you know, the table one with the number set out there, those are paths that we've got recorded. Yeah, but obviously, like you said, there's a whole process of going through with definitive map modification orders that part of the team are trying to work through. So, yeah, if you've got particular locations, then please, you can send them to me, and I can always check those out outside of the meeting for you.
Does that mean, Ed, that the network is bigger potentially than what's recorded in the document?
I guess it's always changing over time. Yeah. So yeah, a simple answer would be yes. Yeah. Or could be.
Just following up on Councillor Thomas's point about, you know, identifying which are the paths that are perhaps more popular and should be maintained more. I just think we have an easy go-to for that, and that's which ones are being reported. And I would argue that that's where we focus, where the maintenance is. Those are obviously the ones that are being used and people care well enough to report things. I agree that some paths will go into disrepair, and at some point someone will decide they want to use it, and then they'll report it, and the process will start again. So I would imagine that's one way of anticipating where the requirements are for maintenance.
Thank you, Councillor Peverdy. That's an important point for the committee around this idea of, do we try and maintain the whole network, or do we have a recommendation around focusing our priorities on those paths that we know will be used? Before I bring in Councillor Highfield, I want to bring Arthur in.
I believe every footpath is important. I think it proved itself in COVID because lots of people were then walking from their home, and in some cases walking out and walking back. It's the fact that they were able to get out in the fresh air. It's good for your physical health, mental health. The issue of I keep hearing it's a matter of resource and money to repair footpaths. There are an incredible number of willing and able volunteers out there. The Ramblers, Practical Footpath Team, parish councils, other walking groups that have volunteers. Now, there are far more of those than the council have staff to do work. And I believe if we had a effective volunteers officer controlling this and a system where issues could be seen, worked on by properly trained people, that the burden of money is not as great as people will have you believe.
Yes, we'll be looking at that when we come to partnership in the third objective, which I think is quite key here. But I was just trying to get the issue of that first question of the whole network and applying the same priority to the whole network, or focusing on that part of the network that was more used. That's the only point I was raising.
Yeah, actually, Arthur has said exactly what I was going to say. There are, there's an army of volunteers available that can fill in the gaps which the council and its resources cannot fill in. And I honestly believe they can maintain just about all the footpaths in conjunction with us if they're properly coordinated. And that is the key, the coordination of them, the directing of them, the request to them that, hey, look, there's these 2 footpaths in this area and we haven't been able to get to them and we don't think we can you do something? I think would almost always result in a positive answer. They love it. This gives the Ramblers an excuse to go somewhere and take their bits of kit with them and clear it away. And if you add to that, making sure that landowners fulfill their responsibility, with the combination of those 3 areas, the council doing what it can with its resources, with the enforcement doing what it can, and with the volunteers filling in the gaps, I really think we can maintain the whole network without any increase in expenditure. That's my belief.
Thank you, Councillor Highfield. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I have to totally agree with Councillor Highfield and Arthur's comments about us maintaining the whole network. It is our responsibility as a council to make sure that the county's PROW are maintained so we can access them, or not we can access them, but every member of the who's a resident here or visiting tourist-wise has access. Consequently, the ability for maintaining it is obviously, I believe, too much for us as a council to do, and hence the volunteers being key in that solution. And part of that is the role of the footpath officers, which has already been mentioned. Now, whether those footpath officers are a council-led employee or a council-led volunteer is up for discussion. And I'd just like to get a feel from our officers on where they think the footpath officer role lies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Also, we have the improvement plan 2018 to 2028, and I've been looking at that because it's one of the appendices. That improvement plan doesn't talk about splitting up the network into the most used paths or the least used paths. It talks about accessibility. The whole thrust of the improvement plan is about a balance between users, making the network accessible, and that should be our guiding light in terms of policy. And so when you answer the point that Councillor Davis has just made there, can the committee be assured that we are still committed to that improvement plan? Because it's all very well having a piece of paper there, but I want to make sure that is still the framework within which you are working as officers in the council. And then I'll bring Councillor Price in after that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I think we've touched on this whole thing about how we categorise paths and which ones are valuable and maybe which ones, possibly aren't. But within the row, there is a section. I think it's Appendix 4. It talks about categorisation of paths. So we use categories 1 to 4. So the promoted routes, so we've got the Wye Valley Walk, Offa's Dyke, that's category 1. So those are our most important routes that we've got. But then obviously as you go down, we go down to the 4th category where it's recognised that some paths will have little or no amenity value. So that's sort of how we will look at things. So you know, it's my understanding that we obviously carry out routine inspections on those category 1 routes. We can't get out and inspect absolutely everywhere, so we are reliant on those reports from members of the public coming in and helping us. So absolutely, if somebody makes an inquiry, that will be looked at, and one of the public rights of way inspectors will go and look at that, and they're split north south across the river basically. So that's how we deal with those. So yeah, hopefully that answers that part of the question.
So committee, we have almost a categorisation similar to what is used in highways in terms of this priority, in terms of what is the most important part of the highways, what is the most important part of the prow. I'm going to bring Councillor Price in, but that's something I think we need to bear in mind, and whether we agree with that or whether we want to actually have a recommendation that changes that in some way, and how we might be able to help the council to deliver that as well, because that's an important point in terms of how we strengthen the partnership working across there. Councillor Price?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. A few things have cropped up in the conversation that I just wonder whether we're just looking at it through a mindset of today and how the population is today, rather than looking to the future of a network. You've mentioned several times in the last 5 minutes accessibility. Can you describe what you mean by accessible? Is it accessible for people to go to a path, or are you making paths accessible for all people with disability needs? Because when you use the expressions that you've used, someone listening to this debate could say every path has to be accessible to all disability users. It is a complete fallacy to think that we could ever get to that scenario. Now, in the last year, 2023 was apparently the first year in 100 years where there was more deaths than there were births in the indigenous population of this country, forgetting migration. If we fast forward 50 years, many of our older, fortunate, early retirees who are fit and can do this work won't be that makeup of the population as we go forward, because the younger generation will be doing more to make their livings. They won't get to the position that the privileged people of today, of the 50s, 60s, 70s are. And if we're having this debate, are we talking about it as it is today, what we want it to be today, or is it what is going to be practical for 10, 20, 30, 40 years' time, and who will be the users of it? That's what I think scrutiny of the network is, not just about to the very moment of today.
I'm listening to you, Councillor Price, but I also will point you to the improvement plan. That improvement plan is 2018 to 2028, and that does talk about accessibility for all users, as far as I was aware, unless somebody's going to correct me. Councillor Highfield?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Price on this. I don't think it was ever expected that you could make, for example, all the footpaths wheelchair accessible. But I do know that in my ward, there are 2 parishes that are actively looking at creating a wheelchair accessible walk in the neighbourhood of their parish, so that people with wheelchairs can get out into the woods and the fields, and they are looking to raise local money and local funding to make that possible. But to make the whole network accessible, for example, to wheelchairs, is effectively impossible, and I don't think that was ever the intention, as far as I know.
Thank you, Councillor Highfield. Councillor Peabody?
We have a representative from Accessible Herefordshire on the local access forum, and she campaigns very strongly that when a style needs replacing, it is replaced with a gate. So it's a long process gradually to improve those areas that can be improved for those who can't perhaps get over a style. So more accessible gates rather than styles is the kind of policy we're on at the moment, as I understand.
Can I just say that was partly to make access for dogs.
Well, it's an interesting point, but it's something again that we can look at as a committee. And certainly the trend today, particularly buildings and other structures, is to make them accessible as much as possible for those who are disabled. But I accept your point, Councillor Price. There will be areas where it will not be possible to do that, and we have to be realistic as well. But as Councillor Peabody says, we can still make the network more accessible than it is today. And that's the point that you're making. Thank you. I'll bring in Arthur then. I'm going to move on to the next objective, which is the state of the network, which we've touched upon to some extent, but I do want to focus on that. Arthur.
I would just like to mention that there is a big savings, financial and otherwise, on the health agenda for getting people out in the countryside. Everybody's talking about it, on how much benefit it is to your health and mental well-being to get out and be in the fresh air. And I don't think it's ever put into the equation that if we got more and more people out walking, on how much that would save on our health agenda and budget.
Well, that's something maybe we need to ask officers. Do we take that into account in terms of when we're looking at the expenditure and the case for making it?
I'll take that one.
Let you take the easy ones now.
So what we do need to do is work closely with colleagues in public health. So if we're looking to work with doctors and doctor surgeries, if they're almost doing the prescriptions for better health, so getting people to do walks. We do guided walks, so the council itself has a guided walk programme, so we encourage people to join in, get themselves active, and actually those programmes themselves have been very successful in terms of when we look at the repeat people coming back for more, and those people where we've got them, they've got the bug, and they've actually become walk leaders themselves. So not only do we then have our own facilitated walks, they will then do their own walks that help them out. I think it was Councillor Phillips a number of meetings ago that mentioned the need for circular walks around parishes and the like, and where we know of those needs and those requirements, we can certainly work with the parishes, the PFOs and the local groups to make sure that those paths, which may not currently be what we would see as a strategic route in terms of linking, I don't know, Ross to Hereford, but actually are very important for local people to get out and about and do stuff themselves. Whether it's the mom groups, the mother and toddler groups going out in the morning for a walk around, people of my age, middle-aged, getting older, or for the older age groups getting out and just having time in the countryside. But we do need to work more closely with public health to make sure we are investing money in the right areas.
Do you think that's a recommendation you would like from the committee?
I think it's probably an inevitable one, to be honest. We've got to work more closely with colleagues across the piece. It's not just about, is the way accessible, it's what benefit does that way get, and how do we tie those advertising links together? How do we encourage people to go and use what they've got? Because it's not a case of use it or lose it in this instance. It's once a highway, always a highway. But I think it's more from the health benefit, use it or lose it from that respect. So it's working with our health colleagues to make sure we get the right publicity out there.
I'm always grateful for suggestion for recommendations, you know, Mark. Thank you very much. Can we move on now to the state of the network? I know we've touched upon it slightly, but the thing that was missing in the papers for me very much was how we monitor the state of the network over time. I didn't get a feel for whether it was better than this 20 years ago or whether it was worse than this 20 years ago. And that's one of the areas I want to touch upon now. Ed or Mark, do you want to give us a sort of entree into that in terms of your view on what the state... I know there's the statistics in the document, but whether you'd want to just give us a feel for what you think the state of the network is at the moment?
I'll pick that one up. So Yeah, in the paper, Councillor Stark. So yeah, completely valid point they made about sort of, how can you see how things are moving? I think that comes down to how we record data and those inquiries, how we can access it, how we can put it out there in the public domain. You can see what's going on. I think I would probably struggle to tell you whether it's better or worse than 20 years ago. I wasn't here personally then. I don't know how many of the members of the team were and whether we'd actually have that data to kind of back that up really. Within the report, we've obviously put the number of open inquiries that we've got on our system at the moment. And when somebody reports something to us, that comes now through the council's digital front door if they go online through the website, and that automatically gets fed into our Confirm software system that we use. So we've been doing quite a bit of work on that system over the last few months to try and get it into a place where it's a bit more fit for purpose. In terms of, from my point of view, in terms of understanding and having that visibility of what the team are doing day to day, their workload, what's going on, spotting those patterns and trends of what's coming through, trying to be more efficient with how we deal with the inquiries, and then also using it as a basis for how we get more money into the team, where that money needs to go. So if I'm asked, what investment do we need? Well, we've got an issue with X or Y. Well, actually, is that borne out of the data, or is that just something that somebody sort of heard anecdotally? So within Table 4, it talks about the nature of the inquiries that we get. Personally, the team will probably shoot me down, but the number of inquiries we're getting each year don't seem unreasonable in terms of the volume that we get. But what you probably don't see is the amount of time that some of those inquiries can take. So, it could be dealing with landowners, as we've sort of been talking about this morning. It could be something as simple as just writing a letter out, something happens. It could be a visit to something to go and have a look at it. For me, it's about getting that information coming through, that's nice and clear up front, that maybe necessarily we don't need to go out to every single site to have a look at something. People can take photographs. I know myself, when I've reported issues elsewhere across the country, you send a photograph in, that's easy to spot. With the parish funding that we've just been putting out over the last couple of months, we've had a number of expressions of interest come back and bids that we've been asking for, and we asked parishes to come back with photographs and what 3-word locations, and from a lot of those it's really clear and obvious that work needs to be done. It could be a broken finger post, a broken stile. Personally, I don't see why we necessarily need to go out and visit all of those when we can quickly and efficiently just put those jobs out to Hoople, who carry out our work, or to the volunteer army that we got out there. So for me, it's about trying to sort of make that whole end-to-end process a lot more efficient, a lot more agile, quicker, to get things done, because I don't see, apart from bridges, I don't see a lot of these other issues as being particularly difficult. Maybe some of the obstruction issues that we see, that we're talking to Councillor Highfield and the subcommittee about, they can take quite a lot of time and energy, but some of those other things are easy to pick up on. So that Table 4 is the number of open inquiries that we've got at the moment. That was sort of fresh data that we had. For me now, there's an element of going through those open inquiries with the team to understand, is it correct? That's what we've got in the system. The system needs to be that one version of the truth for us. So whenever anybody asks anything, we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, rather than people keeping notes in their own record books and things like that moving forward. So that's probably sparked a few questions.
Yes. Well, before I go to Councillor Peverty, then Tom, and I'd like to bring Arthur in as well on this one and his view on the state of the network. But the data is key here in terms of understanding how we're managing the network. And key performance indicators, are you thinking of developing them? Because one of the areas that has struck me in terms of the meetings we've already had, Ed, with Arthur and Tom, and with some of our own members in terms of planning this meeting, is we don't have that set of key performance indicators to know how our interventions here, Ed, in the way that we actually manage the network, how that is impacting on the health of the network and whether it's having the positive sort of result that we want. Could you just comment on that? Then I'm going to bring in Councillor Peverdy, Councillor Tom, Arthur, and then Councillor Highfield. Okay.
I'll go first if that
Right.
helps. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think, you know, from the time I've been here, you know, we obviously have we work with the LAF, so we have that scrutiny on a regular basis. I think one of the things I've sort of noticed is that struggle in terms of us being able to provide the information in a consistent basis. You know, pulling it out of the system, providing the LAF with what they would like in terms of a report. So that's something that we're aware of. I think at the last meeting, possibly, we said, you know, let us know what you would like to see. Obviously, it's a bit chicken and egg. Well, what have we got that we can provide? I think we're closer to sort of, you know, being able to provide that now that we can come up with almost, like you said, those KPIs, that method of measuring, you know, what is going on in the network, how are we performing as an officer team moving forward. So obviously that's something that I feel that we need, you know, we must have as a team. So when I'm looking at the manager, you know, who looks after the public rights of way team, that we've got our finger on the pulse in terms of what's happening day to day. We know what's going on, that, you know, members of the team are clear about what they should be doing and where we need to be focusing our efforts. So there's obviously a lot of inquiries that come in. I think, like I said before, to me it feels manageable, but almost, you know, how do we deal with these issues that come in, these inquiries, and how do they get processed is part of another conversation, I think. But, you know, if you're looking for recommendations, you know, out of this, then I think definitely, you know, working with the LAF in terms of some sort of, you know, performance framework would be useful. So yeah.
Right. Thank you for that.
As long as Mark's not going to shoot me down in flames now, but.
I'm going to...
Sorry,
you want to
add to that. So I've been around slightly longer than Ed, and I remember the best value performance indicator framework, BVPI 178, used to be the measure for public rights of way, and that was the ease of use of the rights of way network, and it was administered by the Audit Commission. 2.5% of footpaths randomly selected were surveyed every year to determine, if you like, a sample view of how accessible your network was. So let's not try and reinvent the wheel. The BVPI structure is already there. We can revisit that and look at that and look to adopt that and move forward with something along those lines, if that's an indicator that would be useful for you to measure.
I'm not saying which indicators you need to use in the recommendation. That's up to you. Yeah. I'm just saying we should have KPIs. That's the point I'm trying to make. I'm going to breach protocol, Councillor Peverdy and Councillor Highfield, and bring in Tom, because I can see Tom's got a really good point to make here. Thanks.
Actually, I was just most interested in that last reply. I was going to mention that myself. The previous statutory performance indicator for measuring footpaths, which was dropped a few years ago, but the Malvern Hills AONB have continued to use it with their footpaths, and we in the Ramblers have carried out monitoring using that performance indicator in the AONB, so you can get that benchmark which you're seeking. And I think if it came to reinstating some sort of performance system, you know, volunteer groups like the Ramblers could help do that, and that would save an awful lot of expenditure and hopefully get a good result. I can't commit the Ramblers to that, but I think it would be well worth exploring. And then I wanted just to go one stage further back in the discussion about, again, to support what the officers were saying about making better use of parish footpath officers in dealing with these reports. Because I'm a parish footpath officer for covering North Bromyard, a group of parishes, and it would be just so much more efficient if I were contacted by the footpath officer, and I would be probably able to respond quicker. I'm nearer, physically nearer than they are, and making better use of the resources we have would be the key to success.
I'm going to breach protocol again, because I did say I was going to ask Arthur for the laugh assessment of the state of the network. Arthur, do you want to make any point at this stage before I move on to members?
No, all I want to do is agree with what Ed and Tom and others have said about BVPI 178, which was, I felt, a useful and ongoing survey, and it's a shame it was dropped, actually.
Thank you. Councillor Peabody.
Looking at the number of open inquiries concerning vegetation and upgrowth, what I find really useful in my ward is that I have information from the maintenance of kind of green spaces about grass cutting and general maintenance that I can give to the members in my ward. So I get lots of inquiries about what's the state of a particular green space, and I can say, I've looked at the schedule of grass cutting and this is when they're going to come, and that kind of resolves a lot of things. So my point is about communication, about how we look after the prows, given also that we've just had a very interesting talk about hedges and when they should be cut and when they should be maintained. Is there more work we should do communicating to prow users when regular maintenance might take place either by the landowners or the council, so that we can actually allay some of these inquiries about vegetation and upgrowth by saying hedges will be cut in, you know, October or something like that. So some kind of improved communication might reduce the number of inquiries.
I'll have a go first, and then Mark can have a go as well if he wants. I'd imagine these are probably reports of, you know, overgrown vegetation obstructing footpaths, you know, places that we want to go. So it's about us. I think probably I would say being able to tell people that we're already aware of an issue, that we don't get repeat inquiries. In a previous council as well, it was probably about educating people, like you said, about when we will undertake works. So we used to have sort of, in terms of grounds maintenance, we used to, that was on a more cyclical basis, and you're probably going to get some of these might be more spot issues. But it's probably about educating people that we will only undertake certain works at certain times of the year, like you said. So we're not going to go out and be encouraging hedge cutting, you know, when there's birds nesting and things like that. So people understand it, that they report things at the right time of year, or they recognise something before it becomes a bigger issue, maybe. So I think that probably links into how we do publicity around the network. So it's about the routes that we've got, the paths that we've got out there, and encouraging people to use the network. But then it's also about how we can encourage them to report issues to us in the best way and at the right time of year, that we can then go and deal with them. So I think it all kind of comes together like that, if that maybe answers some of the question. But
yeah, can I just follow up on that? I noticed that whereas annually the kind of number of inquiries is about 1,300, but yet this year to date there's only 373. So does that indicate that these inquiries are kind of seasonal, or that the network is much improved and people have less to complain about?
I wouldn't be that foolish to say that, given that we're being recorded. But yeah, those are the inquiries that we've had to date across the team. I think as we get better with the data in the system, I would be expecting to see certain trends around when things are reported. And then I think that would then help us in terms of those campaigns. So we're going out to landowners at the right time saying, look, this is an issue that we get every year. So one of the items on there is ploughing and cropping. So you're going to get certain times of the year when obviously those take place. So I think it is about educating, you know, drainage issues that we get as well. So it's about can we be better in terms of going out with those campaigns with landowners and getting people to do things that they should be doing on the network, but then also perhaps asking that volunteer army out there to look for certain things at times of the year to help us. From my point of view, we can work more efficiently if we can try and batch these kind of inquiries up. So rather than somebody going out and looking at single inquiries time and time, and we respond to each one on a one-on-one basis, where we've got a group. So signposts. There's 205 open inquiries at the moment that we've got on the system. How do we handle those? Can we go out and deal with those in batches around the county? Do we take things on a ward by ward basis and you go in and deal with everything in one go? So I think the data helps us understand how we should be working and can we be a bit more efficient with the resources that we've got. So thank you.
Just before I bring in Councillor Highfield, and you're very patient because it's been a long process to get back to you. We were thinking as a committee of a recommendation around ensuring that the reporting system for defects on the Prowl network was as effective as the reporting system for highways that we have through the Balfour Beatty system. Have you given any thought to that? Because that will probably be one of our recommendations, because that could link back to perhaps this variability in what is recorded or not recorded. It can be down to how good the system is for people to be able to record that easily.
Yeah, so I can come back on that. So the reports that we receive at the moment, people can come through a multitude of channels, but the main one that sort of the best one for us, really, I suppose the most efficient one is coming through the council website. So we recognise that people don't always want to ring up during the opening hours that maybe the contact centre have got. Sending an email to us might not capture all of the information that we would like to see. It doesn't maybe necessarily always help us pinpoint the exact location, which can be a particular issue on the public rights of way network. You can't always say you're outside number 33 or lamp column 321. Whatever it might be to help pinpoint that particular location, that defect that they might be reporting. But when you come in now, you go through the council website, and that's something that we've been working on over the last few months, that it comes in through the council's digital front door, so Granicus. It now automatically links into our Confirm system. So every report that somebody makes to us will automatically feed into Confirm and auto-populate. In the past, it used to come to the team as an email. Somebody would then have to manually enter that information into Confirm, which would lead to a delay, a bit of a lag. If that person was on holiday, we would try and cover that role as best as we could, but obviously within the resources that we got within the team. So that information now, as I said, goes straight into Confirm. Dependent on where that inquiry is across the county, it'll automatically get allocated now to one of the two rights of way inspectors. So it'll either go to Crispin, who looks after the north of the county, or to Kerry, who looks after south of the River Wye in the county. So we've removed some of that double handling, that manual handling of the process along the way. The next bit that we're now looking at is how we can, when inquiries are dealt with, how that feedback loop goes back round to the member of the public reporting it, or whoever it might be, if yourselves, that you get that information back to say, thanks, you reported this inquiry, you've been able to track it through your cases through Granicus, but ultimately you get an email at the end saying, we said we would do it, we've now done it, and this case is kind of now closed. And ultimately, can we share a photo of the completed work to kind of almost prove that we've done it? So that's kind of where we're at with that process and improving it at the moment. A lot of the information we've got, it can be opened up. Can we then display these inquiries on a map that people can see it's already been reported, we're aware of it, and make it a lot more accessible like that?
You'll have to bear with me, Councillor Highfield, because I want to bring Arthur in at this point as a user.
I'm always at your service.
I don't want you resigning from the committee because of my chairmanship. Arthur, you're at the end where people have to record these defects. What do you think about it, and do you think people understand the best way into the council to report them?
I don't think the council's reporting system is as user-friendly as it could be. I believe that there should be a system where you can just go on the map and with a cursor pinpoint where the issue is and declare what that issue is, and that then should be accessible to all volunteers who can, whether they've got a sign in on there that they can say, oh, that's a job that I could do, it's on my doorstep, I'll go and, you know, do a bit of trimming or cutting back of vegetation, and once that's done they can sort of sign it off, and then the whole council volunteer network can see what's going on and react accordingly.
Thank you. Ed, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'll just come back in on that. So that is something that we have been working on. So on the council website, you can, I've just literally been on there. You can go to the public rights of way page, report a problem page, and you can search for public rights of way. You can just put a dot on. But what we've asked now is that the issue type is just chosen just from a menu. So the items that you can see on the table in table 4 pretty much match up with what we're asking for. So that feeds through into confirm as well and comes through straight away. What we are trying to do, now is how can we get these jobs to PFOs and other members, of that sort of that volunteer army who want to help us deal with some of these matters. So what we do want to do is sort of make sure we don't create an industry out of nothing. Really, it can be kept quite simple. We're exploring how we can give members of that team access to confirm that they can receive jobs. Obviously, we don't receive information into confirm of who that person is reporting an issue. We can get that out of Granicus when we need to, in terms of a customer, but it's just the inquiry. So we definitely want to try and make that more streamlined. Talking to the volunteer development coordinator, now we've got these lists. It's can we literally just send them out to people like Tom and others who can help us have a look. So yeah.
Yes, just to warn you, Ed, we will probably have a recommendation on that around this reporting system because that's quite important. Councillor Highfield.
Thank you so much, Chairman. I hope it's worth wait, my questions. I think either the last or the previous enforcement subcommittee, Ed, you did suggest that you might, or you hope to be able to create access to the data by ward and by parish, so that, for example, the parish footpath officer or the ward councillor could look at their ward and see which are the outstanding prowl issues, and preferably those that have been resolved compared with perhaps 6 months earlier or 1 year earlier. So my first question is, do you still hope that will be possible to do that?
Yes, yeah.
That would certainly help the volunteers to get there. Now, there is also, obviously, my particular issue is enforcement. There is an enforcement policy that's highlighted by an acronym, but it is actually very simple. Although it's a little pamphlet that describes it, it's very simple, where there is either a neglect or a willful obstruction to a right-of-way or a road, for that matter, and that is that you confirm that it's actually blocked as alleged. You write to the owner of the land and ask them to fix it. If they don't fix it, you take enforcement action. Either by directly taking action or by sending our contractor to take care of it and then billing the landowner for the cost. There's been no dispute that is feasible, that is legal. I've double checked with the legal people. They say yes, that's absolutely doable. But in the past, it was very important for me, and I'm sure Justine felt the same way, that we didn't start pointing fingers at the past. We would just try and make things better for the future. But in the past, it simply wasn't happening. And what we need to make sure is that simple procedure still practical from your office point of view, from the PROW office? Are they still able to take that sort of action? I know they do for cropping, but for other issues, is that practical or not?
To write back to the landowner, or to write out to the landowner?
Straight away, if they don't take action within the given time, you prosecute. Because we just have simply not been prosecuting. That's the case. We've just been reminding them, and when they don't do it, we go and do it ourselves. That's what's been happening in the past.
Yeah, so I know, I understand you've obviously received a reply from legal, haven't you, about
Yes.
about this matter. So obviously that's accurate, what's in there. But I think any of these inquiries that we get, I think for me it's about that process of how we do actually deal with them. So we do obviously need to tell people if there's an issue. We do need to write out to them. Obviously, then it becomes a case-by-case basis of where it goes from beyond that. I mean, I think, legal obviously happy to work with us where we need to, but obviously we need to be reasonable and proportionate, and it needs to be in the public interest if we do take anybody to court. But where we need to, then obviously that's the process.
We simply have not
so.
done it in the past, and I wanted to make sure that we're willing to do that going forward, where we've had willful obstructions that in one case, as you know, have gone on for 26 years, and we've got others where people have made extensive efforts to block rights of way, have ploughed fields so that the remains of the track have disappeared completely, have fenced it off. We've got plenty of cases like that, well documented, repeatedly reported, and we have not taken action. Now, there seems to have been a psychology of not wanting to take action. It sounds a bit like the Environment Agency in breaches of their pollution rules, where they say we like to work with the landowners. Yes, and if they don't work with you, well, we work with them some more. And if they don't work with you more, you give them more advice, and they don't take it, then what? Well, we give them more advice. And they never get round to actually prosecuting anybody. And that is the problem that we've had in the past, and which allowed things which should have been simple to go on. And that's why we've got, willful obstruction 127, other enforcement issues 151, and vegetation upgrowth. A lot of that will be where landowners have neglected to clear the vegetation that they're supposed to clear. So we could actually make a dramatic improvement to the PROW network simply by getting people to stop blocking the rights of way and to do their maintenance work. And that will require, as an example, some cases of enforcement. And then the word will go round that the council's willing to take enforcement action if people don't play the game. I mean, that's where we're at.
Perhaps we think about that as a recommendation, although I'm a bit wary about the nuclear option because it's much better.
But it's
obviously
policy,
negotiate,
Mr.
I
Chairman.
know.
It's already
I
an
know.
official laid down policy with legal backup. And unless you change the policy, that's what we're supposed to be doing. And we simply have not been.
And we'd be asking them to simply implement that.
Simply implement the existing policy on enforcement. Yeah.
On enforcement, okay, we'll think about that as a recommendation.
There's obviously a tension between maintaining the best relationship with landowners, who are so important in terms of keeping the network clear, and following up on enforcement. I just wonder if it's best. I think currently that happens all within the PROW team. They've got to maintain really good relationships and enforce. And I just wonder if they need to be separated out, whether that would help support the team, whether that would mean that you can do a kind of good cop, bad cop type of scenario, something like that.
I'll take that one. So I think actually what we need to remember is, in effect, a relationship works because we are seen to be fair and open and honest with people. And it's no different to contract, is it? So I can go and have a nice conversation with one of my contractors, and then the following day we can have a very difficult conversation. But the following day after that, we'll go back to that cordial relationship, because that's the way these things work. People need to understand that they have responsibility. We need to hold people to account for what they're meant to be doing. Similarly, they need to hold us to account for what we're meant to be doing. So it is that two-way street. having a good cop, bad cop probably means we've got to double the size of the team. And we haven't got the resource to do that. And you still got to then develop a relationship. You can't just send somebody in. Well, actually, I'm going to send Mark in today because he's the bad cop, and here he comes to see you, and does the nasty thing, and then Ed has to go back in the following day and re-establish that relationship. So you've still broken the relationship in parts, or you've made that a very difficult conversation with the council, because at the end of the day, it's the council that has a relationship. It's not the officer, not the person that's there. So we need to give our people the opportunity, the training, to actually go and do and have sometimes those difficult conversations that will result in action that the landowner may not want to see happen. And I've not seen the data behind the numbers, but it may well be that actually our bigger, more important landowners actually do what they are meant to do. But the unintended consequence of what's happened in the not too distant past of parcels of land being separated up and sold off as speculative pieces of land for people to come and just, oh, I might get something out of this if I'm lucky, has meant that actually our job has become more difficult in terms of, rather than one landowner to deal with, you've got 5 or 6 different landowners to deal with, 3 of which are really good, 2 of which are mediocre, and 1 of which really couldn't care less because he's based in Barbados, and I only bought the land as a speculative investment, and I'm never going to spend any money on it.
Can I come back? Can I come back on that briefly after you then?
Well,
Justine?
only to follow up that you know, we recognise as well that having a public footpath over your land has a value on the land, has an impact on the land value. So there's that, you know, that tension as you described, that land ownership is changing as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't want to be difficult about this, Mark, but there's nothing in the official laid down policy that says, yeah, but sometimes we have to, you know, because we've got to work with the landowners and we have to, it doesn't say that. It says clearly and simply that if people are willfully obstructing or are neglecting their riparian responsibilities, they get a letter to ask them to please do it. And if they don't do it, then prosecution should follow. Now that is the actual laid down policy. If you're going to say, yes, but sometimes, you know, we've got to work with people and, you know, most of them are okay, and that's not what it says. And if we want a policy that says that, it's rather difficult to word it, isn't it? Of course, we need to be reasonable. If somebody comes back and say, yeah, I can, but my planter's not working, I didn't have the hedge trimmer available, and I'll get round to it as soon as it's fixed, and sure, you know, but as it is, when people bought that land, they knew there was a right of way across it. They knew there was a footpath or a road. Their survey would have told them precisely what that was, where it was, and what their requirements were. We have a council document on riparian responsibility as well that lays out clearly what landowners are required to do by law. And we can give them that to start with. I've distributed a copy to all my parishes so that people can be reminded through that route. But that's what the law says. And we're not really in a position to second guess the law, are we? Surely.
So I think what I said was exactly what you said. We need to hold our landowners to account. And sometimes that'll be a nice conversation because we're out there and they're doing something for us. We've provided them with stiles or gates or something else, and they're doing that for the benefit of the community. Other times we'll need them to do some work, and that's where we have to hold them to account. And they can too hold us to account. I don't disagree that we should be implementing our policy to its full extent. I've done that with other authorities. It can make for some interesting conversations on site, but that's what it comes down to. What we should also be doing is looking at where those land parcels have been split up and it's more difficult because I live in Barbados and I've not got access to a tractor or anything else. We could offer a service. We could actually offer that service. And again, I've done that with trees overhanging a road where we've had to go and do structural maintenance to get the kit down. We've had to go and cut the trees. We've cut it down for a darn sight cheaper than each of the landowners could have done it individually and got it done at the time we wanted it done. So I think some of it is about us looking at these problems from a different angle, making sure the landowner is held to account and making sure the landowner pays for what the landowner needs to pay for.
So my recommendation is that we include as a recommendation that the existing policies on riparian responsibility and willful obstruction are followed.
Well, I've got it in a slightly different form of words, Councillor Highfield, but I picked it up. Councillor Thomas, then Councillor Davis. Then I want to move on to the next objective.
Okay, well, I'm no longer a farmer, but I know farmers extremely well. Most of them, my friends are farmers. The one thing that farming will not tolerate are pariahs. We, like most farmers, want to keep the industry. We know we're under it. They know they're under a spotlight. So they don't like pariahs. Now, I will agree, and now this is the council, we've got this with planning as well, where enforcement is just a little bit watered down. And there are times, if you make an example of somebody in the industry, you will very quickly get the other pariahs, because 90% of the landowners will be doing the job properly. You will get the rest of the pariahs saying, oh, okay, perhaps we better have. So just think on it that one good case will probably sort out 90% of the problems. So I think we must not be frightened to use the legal route. I agree with Mark, it's really at the last resort. And the other thing, when we do use the legal route, although we don't necessarily want to name the character, we certainly want to publicise that a character has been prosecuted, which again, we don't do. Planning doesn't do it. So I think on this score, we do need to just be a little bit tougher where it needs to be. If you do that sparingly, you will find most of your problems will go away very quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Davis, and then I'm going to move on to the next area.
Thank you. Just a quick one, really, on the land ownership piece. Where footpaths or prows fall on private land or go through private land, is there a method of the department being updated when land ownership changes? So if somebody, for argument's sake, has a property with a footpath that goes bordering the edge of it, do you become aware when that property is sold and therefore landowners change because the responsibility changes? And if there's, I had one in my parish where there was a set of steps involved in a footpath that was previously maintained by the property owner, then that when the property changed hands, that requirement to maintain that particular set of steps fell to the new owner, but was not aware of it. Just wanted to know if there was a method where you could be informed of land ownership change for prows, therefore you know who to speak to, and there's not going to be a long delay in trying to resolve an issue, potentially. Thank you.
In short, the answer is no, because all those transactions obviously go through land registry, and we only become aware of ownership issues when we do a search on title. It'd be a vast amount of work, and I'm not necessarily be in the public interest for us to hold a mirror copy of the land registry, so it'd be very difficult and unwarranted, I would suggest.
I'm not disagreeing with my boss, but one way I have seen things done is that when you first get in touch with the council about paying your council tax or something like that, that's the sort of the one record that we've got, you know, of obviously a lot of people that you know, you get notified of, you know, welcome to your new home type approach, and you know, this is the day your bins are collected and things like that. So it would need some conversation, and it's certainly not something that would be able to happen, you know, in the short term. But, you know, is there a way that obviously land, you know, people moving into property would know if they, you know, if they had a you know, public rights of way across their land, but is there a way that we could pick that up and say, actually, as an owner of this is what you, they would obviously know what they would, well, hopefully know what they'd need to do anyway, but that might be a mechanism for us in terms of how we could approach that. So obviously give them that up-to-date information and sort of contact details for us when that goes out. But it gets tricky when you're trying to have databases and keep records of people's details for why are you keeping them and things like that. But that was just another way of tackling a similar issue elsewhere.
Are you saying, Ed, that you're willing to do a piece of work on that?
You can always put it forward as a recommendation, but it would be a
Well,
recommendation.
I would put it forward as a recommendation
I-
if you're willing to at least give some assurance.
I think. Well, I think it depends how much of an issue it is really, and is an area that we need to explore really to understand what work would be necessary and talk to colleagues. I don't know whether it's something that Herefordshire really do when people move into to new properties.
Clark, if we cover that in the minutes, then it is recorded that we did have this debate. I think that's quite useful. So, as you say, I'm not sure what the extent of the issue is in terms of having it as a recommendation. Right, we've still got 2 objectives to cover, and I do want to try and call it a close this debate around 12, because that's our normal way of working, because we've got a couple of other items to look at on the agenda. The next one is really look at the proposed models of management and operational delivery. And Arthur, I'd like to bring you and certainly Tom in this, because we've been talking about a lot of the issues from the council's perspective and officers' perspective and how it's managed within the council. But clearly there is this option for partnership working that we've talked about. And I'd really like to know your views on whether there's a better way of working here that would actually help in terms of partnership with yourselves and even with Tom's organisation. Arthur, do you want to start the debate in this area, please?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it in the past. I think we all ought to be working in partnership, and if we could find a means to be more proactive rather than reactive, that's the way forward. And if we could have a online system similar to highways and potholes to list on a map all by pins appearing with where footpath issues are, and that people can access it via a registered sign-on to pick the jobs up and when they've done, complete them, so that both the council and volunteers and the parish councils can see exactly what's going on in their patch and when jobs have been completed and signed off, and with a photograph of when the job's finished. I believe that would be an ideal way of moving forward in partnership.
But this idea of engagement is what I'm getting at as well. Do you feel there's enough engagement between yourselves as the LAF and the council at the current time in terms of just managing the network on a regular basis?
I think in the main it is. I think, if we could work a bit closer together, it might help.
Okay.
But I'm not trying to create work for the volunteers or the council.
Yeah. But do you think the parish path partnership should be strengthened more?
I think, yes, possibly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at one time when there was a grant for parishes for the amount of kilometres of paths, rights of way they had in their parish, the parishes were more committed to doing things and take ownership of the paths and rights of way in their area. So yeah, no, I think.
I'll bring you, Charlie. Okay, because we have got a sort of recommendation around that area, because we do think that one way of overcoming this challenge of trying to manage a huge network is making that partnership with yourselves, with parishes, with volunteers much more effective. So it takes the pressure off officers. And I'm not sure we're utilising the whole potential of that. Tom, do you want to come in at this point?
Yes, well, I agree with that approach. I mean, I think there's one or two fairly simple things that could be done. And one of excuse me, one of them is that at present there isn't a reliable list of parish footpath officers. You know, the council doesn't simply seems not to have an update list, and I know this because I've been one for 10 years, and when events have been arranged for footpath officers, I never got an invitation. So, you know, I think there's some basic stuff to be done there in improving the information, set of information. And then I think there does need to be closer working between the footpath officers and parish footpath officers, and the more work that can be done locally, the better, really, because it will be more efficient and it'll be carried out almost certainly at a much lower cost. If, for instance, work is being done by a lensman, than it would be by a council contractor. So I think there's quite significant savings, improvement in efficiency in doing that.
Thank you, Tom. Before I bring you in, Councillor Highfield, I'm conscious that Councillor Price has not been asked much in the last hour, so I don't want to lose sight of the fact that he is here, and it is a chance to actually ask him what the Executive's opinion is. Councillor Price, along that lines of strength and partnership, because it will have a sort of resource impact, what's the Executive's view, you think, on it?
Well, I think it's pretty clear. Yeah, it's pretty clear from them having raised the extra funding to the rights of way network and drainage network this year in the when we did the accounts earlier on, that we expect to make or enable that partnership to work. So I'm surprised when I take on Tom's view there that, you know, footpath officers aren't known to the council. I would have thought a parish meeting that sets right who's going to be the parish footpath officer, I would have thought that would have arrived in the county council's listing almost immediately, and that there would be a list of those sort of people. The importance of partnership working has been forgotten about for some time, and I think we've got to re-enable it. So the one fact that came out of the parish summit from 3 weeks ago, was there was the relationship of the parish councils and the county councils in those two layers of democracy. And if we make it happen, then we can start to get a level of efficiency in the manpower to do this job rather than the money to do the job. It's not about, you know, there is not the money to be able to do all of this work, but there is certainly the manpower at this moment in time to be able to pull resources in. And I find in my part of the world that there's an inability for somebody who suddenly finds themselves a parish councillor to then find themselves, they've got a position, and what they do with it, there's no sort of connection. So a footpath officer, unless he's got a path into the system to know what he's taking on and what he's going to do and what he's expected to do, not necessarily just himself, but pull a load of volunteers together. I mean, I could see needs in my own ward and villages where a Saturday morning, 2 hours with 10 people would clear all of the backlog and deal with everything that is probably as yet unknown to the council because nobody bothers to report it. But I mean, you know, I have a tourist need on my farm. We have a campsite, and I think this weekend I've been asked 6 times, if not more, where is there a 2-mile walk that we can go and enjoy the countryside? And I send them off to somewhere, and I said, take a hook with you because I know it'll be blocked. And they come back and they say, you're right, it was hard work, but we enjoyed it. Thank you very much. So there's local volunteers, and making it happen is something that we've lost our way a little bit over the last few years. If we can make it happen, the parish, there was going to be a parish charter which the leader wanted to bring forward as a result of the parish summit. That charter could be about, how we harness the local volunteer workforce. And it doesn't have to be a workforce. It's just somebody who walks every week along a footpath would actually keep it open. And that was back to my point at the start. This year in particular has seen a phenomenal growth rate of vegetation that unless you did walk it every week, it would be blocked. And people are unaware of it. I mean, I've opened up some places I won't mention here for access for a certain type of client on the campsite. And you go back in 3 weeks and you think, well, I only cleared that 3 weeks ago. You send somebody there and it's overgrown, and that's just the reality of the countryside. But if we can, through all of these channels, find a way of getting the best value of people that would be prepared to help us, then we can help ourselves financially considerably and keep those paths much more accessible.
Thank you, Councillor Price, because we can capture that in the minutes, which is our assurance that the executive are fully behind partnership working. Councillor Highfield.
Yes, I'm really delighted to hear what was being said here, but what I would urge is that we need to come up with a clear and effective procedure by which we can gather these volunteer resources. I'm not sure that the footpaths officers, well, maybe my ward is different. Theoretically, I've got my 5 parish councils have all got footpaths officers. I can tell you that 4 of them are completely ineffective. They're not necessarily the best path to gather together this army of volunteers that can help us out here. It needs to be a very well coordinated and thought through strategy to make sure it's effective. And I know you'll be nodding about that. For example, the connection with the Ramblers, who are a great resource, is a bit loose in some areas. And so what I'm suggesting, yes, we're all in agreement, I think, now that there's an untapped resource that can help fill the gap in resources that the council can provide, but it needs to be well organised. And we need to think that through very carefully, how we manage that connection so that we can harness those people. So can I suggest that is part of the recommendation on this?
I've just added the word organisation to it. I'm trying to capture all these points as I go along. Okay, Ed.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, if I can just come back on that point. So, at the start of the year, we managed to successfully recruit to the role of volunteer development coordinator. I think is the official title, more or less, or it's got those words in it. But over the last few months, that member of the team, that was a new post that we created. I think it was recognised, before my time that was necessary to try and sort of drive the service forward and make the most of everybody who's out there in terms of those volunteers. So over the past few months, that particular officer has been working hard to try and get those processes and procedures in place that we need. I think the ambition is there, sort of the desire to get going, but we do need to make sure it is coordinated. I have seen something in the past that went off and didn't quite end up where everybody wanted. So you ended up with lots and lots of people getting involved, and there wasn't that structure and that discipline to it, that people then very quickly got frustrated by the system or lack of a system. And we weren't really probably, maximising that potential. We do obviously need to make sure that people are safe and well when they're out there, that we do have that coordination. I think, probably to be fair, we were starting from probably a bit of a low base. So we're trying to sort of, walk and then run with something now and get it going. So that is in train. So please trust me on that. I think we also have different volunteers out there as well. So I think that's something that particular officer has recognised. So it might be that somebody has an interest in just being out and about on the network, and they're quite happy to almost be our eyes and ears, for want of a phrase, and picking up issues that they report back. Whereas other people might want to be a bit more active. They might want to get involved and go out and actually physically do some work on the network. There might be different groups that want to come in and help. There might be other parties that we haven't tapped into in terms of organisations. They have their corporate social responsibility as well. So there might be sort of days that we can get out there. So the National Trust, they do working holidays, or they used to, certainly in the past. So there's a whole host of things that we can go after out there, but it starts with us being organised in the back office in terms of having that volume of work. It's pointless going out and recruiting lots and lots of people to help us if we're not clear about what we want them to do and how we want them to do it. So we've been doing that work behind the scenes to make sure everything's in place. Other departments in the council in terms of legal, health and safety are happy with what we're doing, and that's something that we're pretty much there now. So thank you.
Yeah, but you can take the message from the committee that all power to the elbow of your coordinator.
Yeah,
and get on with it, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it takes the heat away from, I feel like sometimes we've sort of repeated ourselves in terms of what we're trying to do. So, it is something with me to make sure we do get it done as quickly as possible. I think, we are really lucky in Public Rights Away in terms of having that whole volunteer army out there of people who are passionate. There's some extremely knowledgeable people out there about Public Rights Away as well. Which could be a good thing. So it's about tapping into that and making the most of it. And not every service in the council has that ability, that potential. So it is something that we'd be extremely stupid not to make the most of.
So just to add to that, I think where we've got those PFOs that are working really well, be it the eyes and ears, or be it the people who are doing stuff on the ground, what we need to do is celebrate those people. And if we celebrate them, then other people will slowly get the message. Well, actually, you're absolutely right. When I go to that parish, their Public Rights Away are always immaculate, or countryside. They're always countryside. We don't want immaculate Public Rights Away. But you can always walk them, you can always get around them. Whereas in ours, what are we doing differently? How do I get in touch with that parish council to find out how we replicate that in ours? And if we don't celebrate that on the parish's behalf, then the other parishes won't get to find out. We've got to be the collector and the disseminator of that information.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, then I'm going to go on to Greenway policy. You as well,
I just think I actually just went on while you were all talking. I just went on to one of my parish's websites, and the only thing on any parish website is the parish clerk. There's no officers at all, and so therefore it's a golden opportunity. If they want more from us, we want more for them, so they can easily put their officer on the website.
I just wanted to ask if the £250,000 allocated to the Prowl Network has been allocated. Was there lots of demand from parish councils?
So that's something that's with me that we're working through at the moment. So I think the last count was up to about £100,000 that we'd received and hadn't finished going through and collating everything. So yeah, but from my point of view, I think it's been really good. It's an example of parishes being able to help us. So it'd be interesting to see how many of those issues we're already aware of, on our lists against what they've come forward with. But that'll really help us tackle some of those problems that we've got. So broken stiles, people not being able to find their way through because of lack of waymarking or whatever. So yeah.
Will there be another tranche of applications if the amount isn't fully allocated?
So there are some parishes who asked for an extension. So the deadline was the 1st of July. There were some parishes who said that they wouldn't be able to get information back in time. So we said that was okay for them to come back through. But obviously, we'll then just need to understand how much money is left for any future allocations. Yeah.
Thank you. Greenway policy, Councillor Owens. You said you would take the lead on it. So this is your chance.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I guess, well, just to refer back to the supplement on the report, it notes that 3 feasibility studies have been undertaken into greenways in the county, which have currently not progressed. It notes that there are some issues identified that are not easily overcome, but looking at the reports for Hereford to Hay and the Worcester Bromyard Lempster, it notes in those reports that one of the main issues is land ownership. Obviously, all this land, these are old railway beds which passed into private hands a very long time ago. But the reports do suggest ways to overcome those issues. Well, as Ed and Mark were saying, it relies on establishing and maintaining good working relationships with landowners. But to refer back, I think, to what's been said previously by Councillor Price and also by Arthur, these greenways offer, obviously, a much more accessible route into the countryside. They also provide opportunities for the local economy and for well-being, and they would seem to fit quite well with the goals stated in the local plan. So, yeah, I guess I would sort of recommend that, well, I don't know, I would certainly say they're a good thing, but how do we take that forward?
Thank you, Councillor. Tom, do you want to come in at this point?
Thank you, I would, and I'm very interested to hear Councillor Owen's. Very interested to hear Councillor Owen's comments there. I wanted to go back to this paragraph in the report because it, to be honest, it's not really quite accurate. The report says the studies found a number of issues that cannot easily be overcome, and there has been no further progress with the schemes. Well, as Councillor Owens has just reminded us, they did come out with a positive outcome. If I could just quote from the Worcester Bromyard Leominster one, they produced an overall cost-benefit ratio of 5 to 1, that the benefits of the Greenway over a 30-year life would be 5 times the cost, and that, they say, corresponds to a very high value for money category. And they go on to say in the report, this is a positive result which suggests that the Greenway is a feasible project and should be considered in further detail to prepare funding bids for its delivery. Sensitivity tests have also been undertaken to account for uncertainty in costs or benefits, and these similarly demonstrate good value for money. So I just wanted to set the record straight on what the feasibility studies actually say. Now, it is absolutely right that the main issue is land ownership, because as you know, all the Worcester Bromyard Leominster Greenway has multiple land owners. Many people just with their own little bit of strip of land where the railway used to be, and that to gain access to that has to be a negotiation and an agreement with the landowner. There is no possibility of any kind of statutory process or compulsion or anything like that. And the council's already made that clear, and that's absolutely supported by the Greenway projects, that it must. We will need landowner support by agreement and negotiation, and that's what we are setting about doing by looking at sections where it's possible that there is a favourable view from landowners, and you know, looking at getting some success somewhere on the ground and building from there. So that's our strategy. Furthermore, as I think Councillor Owen said, the Herefordshire local plan has extensive references to the Greenway and emphasises the importance of green infrastructure. And I'm surprised that that's not mentioned here, because that's the planning basis for the whole thing, getting a good system of active travel routes that will provide connections between the market towns, not just locally, but more strategically between the market towns, as the Greenways would do.
Thank you, Tom. As it happens, we'll be looking at active travel measures in this committee in about 6 months' time, so that would be a good chance to review it. Before I bring the two councillors in from the, are you in the lead on this, Tom? And do you think you're getting enough support from the executive of Herefordshire and taking this forward?
Yes, well, that's a good question. We haven't had much discussion with Herefordshire Council officers for the last 18 months, I would say. But I think it would be good to have a meeting, you know, to review progress, because there seems to be a bit of a misunderstanding about what actually is happening, and I think that would be useful. But there is a lot of the action is down to us locally at a local level to progress things. So it's not that we're expecting to see the greenways, you know, actually in a short-term programme, but they should be in a future local transport plan, for example, when that is next produced. The local transport plan, you know, should have provision for the greenways.
Well, you've got the walking and cycling improvement plan as
walking and not just cycling, but wheeling.
Okay.
And the greenways would be absolutely brilliant for widening access to people with limited mobility. So it would be very definitely walking, wheeling and riding,
Okay.
horse riding.
Before I bring both of you in, Councillor Price, do you want to give a comment on this?
I don't really have a comment to say, other than I think the project has been missold in the context of what it can deliver. Because when I mentioned this to my local councils in and around the Hay area, and I don't think they were specifically knew about it. But what they did know about was that they were trying to open up the whole route from Worcester to around the north of the county and arriving in Hay. It was met with absolute, I was almost ushered out of the room. Because if you were trying to get an area of Greenway for access for people to go and do all of the active travel measures and walking and being in the countryside, there's probably routes that you would get landowner support on. But as a general, to say we're going from here to there, you will definitely get no support on the whole project until it's been brought about in a way that says, well, where can we get with this? Because at the present moment there are a lot of people, and I've had several. I live in the south side of the River Wye. Several people on the north side saying, but the landscape has changed as a result of the railways and where this is going to go. I mean, if you go on up the top end of my ward, the river bridge crossing at Whitney, it's gone. You know, the railway line is not there. You know, so how are you going to deal with it? You can't rebuild it because there won't be the funding. Can you get round it? Well, then immediately people say, well, you don't have the right to do that anyway. Where you cross that river, you then go into quite a large area of land that has been remapped as far as a farm diversification project, which means you have to go out round further. There is so many problems with this in the way it's been presented, and how can we put it into the local transport plan when it isn't a plan at the present moment? So the Greenway project as it stands was met with horror in my part of the world, and not just from the North Hereford, Worcester, Leinster connection, but the worry that you might be trying to do the same thing from Pontrilas to Hay on the other rail route, which is being closed, which has got even more problems on. You know, so where I'm at the present moment is we can't move forward with it until we start at the basics of what it is we're going to. What is the end result of this? That's where we need to go.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Price. In fact, the recommendation, as it's been emerging, is about you setting out your policy on it, which I think would be a good starting point, Tom. And I think,
Well, it would.
that's quite important. If you want to just finish what you want to say, then I'll bring in Councillor Thomas
Well,
and Councillor Highfield.
it would, but you know, I'm just drawing your attention to the fact that Greenway policy is formulated in the draft Herefordshire plan. We've responded very positively to that, and so there is a policy formulating there. I think Councillor Price's comments do suggest it would be useful to have a meeting with officers, you know, and pick up feedback and all the rest of it, and for us to be able to brief the council on where we're going and
Okay.
future direction.
Mark, can I get your assurance in that, just for the minutes? I wouldn't put it down as a recommendation, but just
Yeah,
for the
yeah,
minutes that you
so-
will meet with the Greenway.
Absolutely. So in the third paragraph of that very short section on greenways, we talk about the local cycle and walking infrastructure plan. Where I normally go on holiday, I have access to a 22 kilometre, until last year 22 kilometre, now it's about 30 kilometre greenway in effect. So it's a level old railway line, which is slowly being extended by the French department in which we go to. So I have no problems at all meeting with you, Tom, to bring those issues forward. They do form a really important part in terms of us getting cycles from market town to market town and linking in. So I would see that as a benefit to everybody in the county, whether that be people walking their dogs, cycling, wheeling, doing whatever they go and do for recreation or for work purposes. So happy to facilitate a meeting.
We'll have that as assurance, but we are going to have a recommendation on the council setting out its policy in Greenway, even if it may be there in part, Tom. I think having a key policy statement somewhere which can feed into the transport plan, feed into the cycling and walking improvement plan as well. Last two comments before we break for recommendations. Councillor Thomas and Councillor Highfield, and that is the end. Thank you.
I agree with Councillor Price on this, and having been a keen rider and ridden over quite a lot of miles of these, in fact I think I've probably ridden on all of the leftover railway lines in Herefordshire, it would be, if you could get permission from the owners to link it all up, the cost, as Councillor Price said, to replace bridges, but just pure fencing, because many of these railway lines now, the owners had fields both sides, they're gone. So it's now a complete field. You're going to have to spend millions just on fencing and infrastructure just to get it up. So the best you can do is just purely short pieces where there may still be, and there are. The Golden Valley line, which is mentioned by Councillor Price there's 3 or 4 sections there where you can probably get 4 or 5 miles out of it. But the rest of it doesn't exist.
But that would be stated in the policy, that's what I'm saying. Being clear about that would be clearer for everyone in order of what their expectations are. Councillor Highfield.
Yeah, I very reluctantly agree with my farming colleagues here. I'm acquainted with a gentleman who lives in my ward who was at the heart of the original project for the Hereford to Hay. It's 27 miles of flat railway line, and as has been stated, much of it now is in private ownership. At the time that the railways were stopped, it was in the 60s, the land was offered to the landowners quite cheaply, and they bought it quite sensibly. And lots of bridges are missing, obviously a major bridge across the river, but also lots of road bridges are missing. There's just a gap where there was once a bridge. However, the only other side to this is how exciting is 27 miles of flat level connection between a city and a big town. I mean, that as a tourist attraction, so short term, it's not going to be possible, except perhaps to open to some shorter sections. But if we bore in mind what the potential would be if we could find a way to complete these greenways, it might even trump all those major difficulties, and they are major difficulties. So I think we should bear in mind, if we look at this, what could be opened at relatively reasonable cost, and what would be the potential longer term to make the whole thing work?
But again, that gets set out in a policy that's clear about the way forward. And there is a vacuum here, and that's what I'm trying to get at. Final word from you, Tom.
Thank you very
before we
much.
have a
Yeah,
break.
well, very interesting to hear those comments. I just wanted to remind everyone that the feasibility studies took into account all those costs, the costs of bridges and so on. You're quite right; it would be expensive, but they are fully costed in the feasibility study, and yet we end up with this really favourable cost-benefit ratio of 5 to 1. So. Just wanted to make that point, but they are ambitious projects, you know, but we want to keep that, and it will take some time to make anything happen. But we should keep the ambition really to do it.
Well, we will have a recommendation to set out the policy clearly by the executive. And as I said, we've got opportunities later in our work programme to revisit this. Can I thank everyone for what I thought was a very interesting debate, and I hope everyone who's been looking on a YouTube do feel we've done, I think, a good service to it. What I'm going to do now is ask for the live stream to be paused, Joel, and then myself and the clerk's going to look at the draft recommendations, try and capture the points that you've made. Officers, you're welcome to stay, but you're welcome to go as well, because after this, we will then do our recommendations. The next two items after are internal to the committee. Councillor Price, similar to you, if you need to go now, that's fine. Arthur and Tom, grateful for you coming today, and thanks very much, and have a very good day. So, Joel, can we pause the line? Welcome back to the Environment and Sustainability Scrutiny Committee, the 22nd July. The committee is now going to consider its recommendations on public rights of way and greenway policy. Clark, can we have them on the screen, please, so that the committee can debate them? I will ask for 2 votes. One will be whether we take them forward en bloc or individually, and secondly, depending on what we decide, whether you're happy with the recommendations as on the screen or whether you have amendments to them. Thank you. Right. I'll give you a few minutes to read them because they're quite extensive, but they are mainly based on what we had before, but with some key amendments.
Number 1, to assess trends in the overall condition of the Prime network, the executive should develop or reintroduce one or more key indicators with interested stakeholders, including the LAF, that can be used to determine changes in the underlying health of the network over time. 2, funding for the Prime network should be prioritised over time on replacing and repairing the 40 to 50 bridges vital to providing a joined-up network across the county. 3, the executive should explore expanding the current system for reporting defects to the county's public rights of way network to make them more user-friendly, to enable parishes and volunteers to carry out remedial works themselves where appropriate. 4, clear standards for accessibility should be agreed between parish path partnerships and Herefordshire Council. 5, the executive should strengthen the parish path partnership through more effective organisation, engagement, coordination and communications with parishes to ensure that they, footpath officers, ramblers and volunteers can play their full part in maintaining the Prime network. 6, in enforcing the current improvement plan, the executive should ensure that there is a balance struck between its primary purpose, protecting access rights to the network, repairing responsibilities of landowners, including the use of prosecution where required. 7, the executive should set out its policy for expanding the Prime network through the addition of active travel routes, so-called greenways, as a vital contributor to our net zero ambitions for the county.
Councillor Highfield?
Could I suggest that number 1 and 3 might be combined into one, because you want to be able to assess the indicators and be able to improve the reporting. That might be possible to combine that into one recommendation. Do you want to consider that?
Any comments from members to that one? I did see them as 2 separate points, to be honest, Councillor Highfield.
Well, I'm easy on that. I just thought it might simplify it. That's all.
What do others think? Because
if we had that thing that Ed was talking about earlier, where we have something that by parish or by ward, you could zoom in to see what's outstanding and what has been done. That enables you to, and would also be a part of the reporting procedure. That would be easily accessible, and it would also indicate progress and performance in getting things fixed.
would you want to amend number 3 rather than combine the 2 then to make that point more clearly? Because I see 1 as a generic recommendation about the overall network, whereas 3 is the day-to-day reporting of defects on the network, which I think are 2 different points, Councillor Highfield.
Okay, I'll go with that. But I'm quite keen on this idea of having something that a footpath officer or the Prowl people or the ward councillor can just click on it. There's my ward. There's the places that have got a problem, and maybe a related table that shows what's been fixed and what hasn't been. You know.
Okay, where we talk about user friendly, do we need to expand that then? I think that's what you're getting at. You're getting at map based. Are you talking about a map based system?
Yeah, map based. Yeah.
Yeah. Could you put in brackets after user friendly, and that should be 2 separate words anyway, Clark, in brackets, map based system. Because Mark's here and he'll understand it and he can interpret it for everyone.
Because Ed has already indicated that he thinks
he
that's
was going
very
to do
possible.
that anyway.
Yeah.
After user friendly, put in brackets map based system reporting. mark-based system reporting, yeah. Because it is a good point, and it's something we do just need to stress.
Map.
Map.
Not mark. That's going it's all down to you.
Marked basis sounds quite good, actually.
Sorry, I hadn't been following that conversation there. Yeah.
And close the brackets. Okay,
I think Daniel raised some concerns about 6 as well. I think can we just have a quick look at that one?
which one?
Recommendation 6.
Right,
I think
fine.
it was, just to make sure it makes sense.
I think it might need something.
Yeah.
And enforce it. I mean, I think you need an and protect between its primary purpose, protecting access rights to the network, and it's not it's riparian and riparian. You need to change it. It's and riparian, not
Yeah.
riparian, and riparian. R-I-P-A-R-I-N.
So I was just coming back on that. All right.
And riparian responsibilities. You need an and in there around a comma.
Okay. Where do you want the and? Sorry.
And between the network and riparian responsibility, including the use of.
And if I may say so, who is going to decide where the balance lies? It's my view. I think Justine would probably agree that the balance has not been right in the past. So where does the balance lie between keeping good relations with the public and being a bit tougher on abuses? And who's going to decide on where that balance lies?
Well, that's why I said the executive. It's their responsibility to set the steer for officers. I'll bring Councillor Owens and then I'll maybe ask Mark for a view. Oh, Daniel's got his hand up as well, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just make sure I understand that? So, because riparian means alongside a river. So, what are we actually saying there? Yes, it does.
Drainage.
Riparian in law relating to or situated on the banks of a river.
Yeah.
Ecology relating to wetlands, adjacent to rivers or streams. Just
Well,
want
we
to make sure
mentioned
we've got the right
riparian
context
responsibility. You
for
think
the
that's
words
too
there.
narrow then?
Well, riparian to me is drainage as well. So
Drainage
if
as
you've
well.
got ditches at the side of a path or whatever, then it's the responsibility of the landowner to maintain that
And
particular.
riparian only means if you've got land that's adjacent to something that's owned by us, that they're not keeping
Well, the Oxford
well
Dictionary.
maintained.
Sorry, Chair, just to say, the Oxford Dictionary defines it as relating to or situated on the banks of a river.
I think probably
So-
it's not the right word, is it? Because
Oh.
riparian really is fishing.
Well, it's what we said in the
Right.
You
debate.
need-
If we want to change it,
You need to refer to the official council document about what are riparian responsibilities. There is a pamphlet on that.
and does
Right,
that
Mark,
not
you've probably
include
got one
everything
available somewhere.
Does that not include everything that we talk about in terms of edges of highways and everything?
So I think all we'd refer to is the maintenance responsibilities of landowners.
Yeah, because as it was, the word repairing was used, so I'm just wondering if that is perhaps the.
I was only picking up
better
on what
usage.
the
Yeah.
wise members of the committee had already said.
Okay.
And you do agree, Councillor
Thank you.
Thomas, we did say riparian, yeah. Okay, so just,
We're okay with
right, are we happy to vote for these on block? Can we have a show of hands then, please?
There's a question from Daniel as well.
Oh, Daniel, sorry, Daniel.
Yeah, Chair. If I might actually, just recommendation 6 strikes me as something that doesn't really require any action. I mean, surely there's always a balance struck. You know, it's, you know, irrespective of whether there's more enforcement or less enforcement or more negotiation or less negotiation, it's always a balance. So you're asking for something that already exists. It doesn't seem to quite make sense to me.
Except in enforcing the current improvement plan, we're asking them that a balance should be struck. It's not been struck at the moment, Daniel.
Oh, okay.
You've got to
It
read
needs
the
to be
first phrase.
improved. Yeah.
You've got to read the first phrase in enforcing the current improvement plan. That's the important phrase, Daniel.
Okay, so you're saying that it's not enforced at the moment?
No, It's not enforced properly. That's what.
Should the recommendation be that the improvement plan is enforced then?
Yeah, that's.
Well, it's what I was saying before, it's what Justine was saying. We were saying, I mean, Mark is quite rightly trying to defend his department from getting too much of an imposition on them. I know that there's a limit on what they can do, but we want the policy on enforcement followed. There is an existing legal supported policy on enforcement. So I just wanted to be agreed that that would be followed. Where possible and practical, you could put that in.
Mark?
So I kind of agree with Daniel. So a balance struck. So there's currently a balance. It just happens to be out of kilter to where you want it to be. So I'm guessing you want the executive to redress the balance, the current balance, to a more stricter following of the current policy.
Okay, right. So what we're saying, I still want to see enforcing the current improvement plan, because that's where it talks about the users. The executive should redress the balance.
Yeah.
Should redress the balance, and I'll tell you where I'm going in a minute. Should redress the balance to give priority to the primary purpose no, you don't need it twice, of protecting access to the network. Primary purpose of protecting access rights to the network by ensuring landowners meet their legal responsibilities. Yes. And you don't need the rest of it. You don't need the maintenance responsibilities of landowners. And where they are not, to prosecute. And we're not to take prosecution where appropriate, or to prosecute where appropriate. Where they're not, to prosecute where appropriate.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy with that. But
I think we'll get pushback that though.
Could I just, yeah. Well, you know, I feel pretty strongly about this, but could I just say that so far the Enforcement Subcommittee has looked at some of the historic problems that we've inherited, but that's not the intention going forward. The intention going forward is to help the organisation make that balance as good as it can be.
Okay.
That's what we hope that this committee will do in future by reviewing cases and maybe making suggestions about where that balance should lie.
And do you want the Scrutiny Committee, obviously, to support that?
Yes, we would like that, yeah.
Daniel, is that better for you for recommendation 6?
Absolutely, it reads a lot better now, and you've got an actionable, measurable recommendation there.
I'm always willing to listen. So, are we? Oh, Councillor Owens, before we move on.
Thank you, Chair. If we're finished with that, I just wanted to suggest a small amendment to point 7.
Right.
Just to read, the executive should set out its policy for expanding the PROW network through the addition of accessible active travel routes, greenways, as a vital contributor to the council's local plan and ambitions for net zero, or net zero for the county, whatever.
As a vital contribution to
the council's local plan and net zero ambitions to the county.
I don't know what the plan's going to be like, of course, because obviously the new government changed the emphasis between plan and development. and
But
having
the-
housing targets.
Well,
Mark?
So rather than local plan, local transport plan, because
Local-
that's where it should sit.
Okay.
although, sorry, I was just thinking the local plan does set out things like economy as well, and so on. And it's
Well,
just Greenway potentially has impacts on that.
Yes, and actually, sorry, that highlights that we talked about more joined up thinking with health and well-being and stuff. That kind of draws on that a little bit more.
That's what I was trying to get.
Oh yeah, because
There's economy, well-being.
yeah. Well, we've got the council plan. The actual council plan itself that's been agreed. That talks about all of that. So why don't we just say the council plan in caps? Because that's the council plan that we've all just agreed in full council. You know, the one that talks about people, place, growth and transformation.
Yeah.
Why just leave it at that at the moment? Because that does talk about health and everything else and well-being. So in capitals, to the council plan, and I want both in caps because it is actually, council plan, because that's just been agreed. Council plan for 24 to 27?
2041?
No, that's a local plan. We're talking about the council plan that we agreed in council for the next 4 years. It's 24 to 28, isn't it? 24 to 28. And it should be plus, because that's something different, plus. Because that's a different statement made in a different place. Plus should be after 24, 28. Plus it's not. As I've outgone it to the council plan, plus it's net zero ambitions for the county.
Yep, looks good to me.
Have we properly addressed the suggestion that it could be a recommendation that we considered this the kind of prow team? Yes, exactly. I'm not sure. I mean, you've highlighted that with reference to greenways, but I wonder if that's properly or could be better addressed in one of the other recommendations.
Well, what do you suggest?
Struggling to read. Mark's got a suggestion.
So you've got the accessible active travel routes, so-called greenways, and the wider Prow network.
Yes, perfect.
Just keep that in the brackets. And
So-called greenways and the wider
Prow network.
Prow network there. Okay. Because you forget the separate things here. Okay. All right, committee, are we happy with those to vote on block? Can we have a vote to say we'll do it on block? Yeah. And can we have a vote now to agree them all? Well done, everyone. Well done, Mark. That's wonderful. Thank you, Mark. Item 8, the chairman's update, because I am conscious of time. We have 2 responses from the executive, one on the 2021 Environment Act, and I'll go through that quickly. The 2021 Environment Act, we gave them 6 recommendations, 4 were agreed, 2 were agreed in part. The first one that was agreed in part was on the council setting out the cost of implementing the Environment Act. They said they can't agree that as a whole because some of the costs are down to the Environment Agency and not to the council itself, so they can only set out the costs for the council. That's what I intended anyway with that particular recommendation, so they made it slightly more complicated than it needed to be. So I don't think there's any follow-up action required on that. And the second one was around engaging the Wildlife Trust and the Rivers Trust in the wider partnership working. They confirmed they already engaged on the Wildlife Trust in that. The Rivers Trust, they say they will pick up in their ongoing work through DEFRA to take forward the work on the Environment Act. And I think, again, unless any of you disagree, that is enough reassurance for me not to take any follow-up action on the 2021 Environment Act. Does the committee agree? Can we move on then to the river pollution response, which is more difficult? Could you put that up on the screen, please? Thanks. You can do it, Joel. This is more difficult because although one part was agreed, 4 parts were not agreed. Well, we're only agreed in part. So I think we just need to look at that and decide what we want to do as a committee. Right. The first one, which is the most difficult. No, it's the other one. It's the river pollution. If we can just have that up there and decide what we want to do before we go into the work programme. Thanks, Joel. It's Appendix 2, I think, isn't it? Yes. Right. That's it? No, that's still the Environment Act. It's Appendix 2 we need, yes. It's Appendix 2. That's it. Thank you. Now, I wanted a river improvement direct action plan because I'll tell you why. It's all very well relying on the past government and their idea they're going to put 35 million into an action plan themselves. But we've been spending years trying to get them to do that. I wanted the council to have its own action plan, which could put commitments on partners to actually deliver for the river, so that although we went in the lead, we would be signalling quite strongly what we wanted as a council out of this. And I'm a bit disappointed with the response. Although they've got, they say, a scoping exercise currently underway, they still don't see the point. It's about us saying what we want, even if it means what others might have to do for us. And even if it's not an old gift, us saying to the Environment Agency, you get out there and you enforce more often. You get out there and you lobby your department to actually get more resources for you to do more on the river. So I'm a bit disappointed here. It's whether on this one you want to go back with a further recommendation to spell that out. Councillor Highfield.
Did this response come from the council officers or did it come from Elissa? Do you know?
It comes from the executive through the council officers, yeah.
But because I work closely with Elissa on these issues, and it doesn't sound like the sort of thing she would say on this. I think she wants the council to have you have to ask her in person, but I think she wants the council to have its own policy. Now, we some things are out of our hands, but we can put pressure on the other agencies that are involved. And to be honest, the more I find out about action on rivers, the more concerned I am that some of it is misdirected. It was not widely known by this council that the levels of phosphate in the River Wye have been going down consistently for years. And yet there is clearly still a problem. So what is the problem? And even Elissa has been unable to pin down precisely. She's given me some biology and some chemistry, but to actually point, this is the problem. No, yet. So there is an awful lot involved in this. If the efforts of the council and the money to be spent is to be spent properly, it does need directing, and I don't see any reason why this council can't be doing some of the directing. So I in other words, in the short, I agree with you.
Stay with that point, because it may actually be what we want to do for all of this, is to get it revisited by Elissa. And if she comes back and said, I agreed this, we could ask her, please, we could set up a meeting with her and we could try and discuss it with her.
Yes, I hesitate to say what she says, because she's I'm enormously impressed with her, and I normally sit in meetings with her and say, yeah, what she said. So let's ask her, can we do that on this?
Okay, can you scroll to the next one, which is recommendation B? Yeah. Now, can you go on to the next page? This was very disappointing because we want, this was what Simon Evans asked us to do, which is to put data collecting equipment into the River Lug so that we had independent access to monitoring data on the state of the river in terms of the impact of pollution. And the reason why this is disappointing is that I thought Alyssa was quite positive about this at the meeting when we had the scrutiny, and yet we've had knockback here, which is very disappointing. I'll tell you why, because we're going to talk briefly about the work programme, the River Lug item we've got, and we can't do justice on the River Lug item if we don't have the data to actually understand whether the problem is still there and what the state of it is. So that's disappointing as well. But again, we can go back to Alyssa on that one. See, well, this is about how much we're willing to push the EA and to pressurise them to do things. Because this is something I think you said, Councillor Thomas, and this is where people don't always understand what their requirements are as farmers, do they? They don't always communicate to them what their requirements are in terms of storage, in terms of everything else. Now, if we communicate to them properly, they have less excuse for saying, oh, I was ignorant here, I didn't quite know what my responsibilities are.
I can't believe that any of the landowners are unaware of their responsibilities. A few, a handful, most are very responsible, but a handful just ignore them. And then what happens is the EA remind them of their responsibilities, and they still ignore them, and the EA reminds them again, and 12,500 EA employees managed 14 prosecutions last year. 14. And we all know the spectacular numbers of abuses of the system that have occurred all over the country. So it simply hasn't been happening.
And again, this goes back to HC being proactive here, Herefordshire, because the part they don't agree is, oh, EA have an existing communication strategy. So what? If it's not working, why
Which
aren't
is
we
completely
saying it's not
useless,
working?
yes.
So again, we should go back to Alyssa and point some of these things out. I mean, it looks like one of us, including me, is going to probably have to draft something on the basis of this, and I'll do it when I've got time. I'll share it with all of you to try and pinpoint where we're unhappy with these responses, and to try, rather than giving recommendations, to try and ask Alyssa for her views on it. Can we go on to, I think there's two more. One is agreed, so we don't need to worry about that. D is agreed, so that's fine. E again. My motion in January 2022 was quite specific, and it was agreed to by the council, which was that in the absence of action, we should push for a water protection zone to be implemented for the whole River Wye catchment area. Rebecca Powell, who was the minister then, turned it down, and since then we've been reliant on voluntary arrangements to try and take this forward. And if you look at all the correspondence from the Friends of the River Wye and all the other interested groups out there, it's just not happening. And we had this announcement from Jesse Norman about this 35 million. There was going to be a River Wye action plan and everything was going to move forward. Now we've got a new government. My view was, even with all that voluntary arrangements, why can't we have a glide path which says, once we get to a certain point in time, if these voluntary arrangements haven't worked, then we should start considering seriously a water protection zone. Councillor
Yeah,
Harfield.
the DEFRA have said that, and EA have said that when all other things are exhausted, what all other things do they mean? I think that since we'll have a new Secretary of State now, why don't we ask for to
Stephen
repeat the letter to the Secretary of
Yeah.
State, say we're not happy with this policy. Can you come up with a better policy that would suit more in line with what this county wants?
Okay, well, we'll
Something like
We'll
that.
put that to Alyssa.
Yeah, because we have a new Secretary of State, maybe they've got a different viewpoint.
So Simon, just to record the minutes, under the 4 partially agreed recommendations, I will draft a letter to Alyssa to have agreed with committee members, pointing out where we feel actions still need to be taken on these particular recommendations. And rather than make a recommendation, let's have an engagement with her. And if she's willing to then reverse some of these statements that we made on the recommendations, then we don't need to make more. But I think we should say it in the letter, but if we don't get a satisfactory response, we will be willing at the next meeting to revisit this, Simon.
Can I
And
suggest?
make recommendations on this again.
Can I suggest, is it possible for this committee to invite the new Rivers champion to come and talk to us? Because the government has appointed a champion. Well, is she ended already?
You went.
She might have been unappointed.
Really?
We don't know, it's up to Labour.
No,
It's
she
up-
has.
She wasn't.
She has been unappointed because she was given the job by the Secretary of State. So naturally, we saw her on Friday. She is no longer the Tsar.
Is that right?
Yep. Dave will.
That's what happens when you get change of governments, change of colour. The new Secretary of State will decide who they want.
Yeah.
Because there's they're very suspicious of the way that the politics has worked in the past and people being appointed in the past.
They're going to cancel our 35 million as well.
They could do.
Well,
I don't know.
suspended,
So, I think that's agreed. I will certainly have that letter written in time for us to engage with Alyssa before our September meeting. Fine.
Oh, Councillor, just to interrupt there quickly. I did send Councillor Swingle-Hurst a relatively late invite just on the off chance that she might want to sit in and sort of, she said unfortunately she'd already made
No,
commitments,
I
which was to
understand
the Upper White Catchment Plan. I think they were launching that. So she did explain why she couldn't be here today, but she did say she'd be quite happy to tackle any matters arising from the discussion. So she's open
That's
to that.
fine. If you can just forewarn her that that will be coming back to her on the responses to the river pollution scrutiny. If you could just forewarn her about that, okay. Thank you for that. We'll move on to item 9, the work programme. If you know we've got this difficulty that we've got more topics than slots, because as you know I like to keep the slots to one topic each, because as you found out today we've taken the 2 hours easily and we could have taken far more in Prow. So we've got a difficulty here, which is the river lug topic. I don't think it fits with energy efficiency and retrofitting anyway, so I think if we're going to discuss it, it has to be moved. My suggestion is we move it to January slot because it fits better with hedgerow and tree management, which I know is one of your key interests, Councillor Highfield. It's a difficult one to do 2 topics in one meeting, but if we do want to have them all for this work programme going forward to the end of March 2025.
I think the river lug is, and because obviously we know it's cost 500 million. I think that's quite an important one. I think we should get that as high up the list as we possibly can.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. The economic cost is, it's not just the environmental cost, it's the economic cost of the lug problems. So if we can help with that, that would be very valuable, I think.
Are you willing to do it along with the tree and hedgerow management topic in the same meeting?
Well, now we know a lot more about hedge management, we could probably move through that a bit more quickly.
Good. So is the committee agreed that we change that topic from the March meeting to the January meeting? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And we finally come to the last item, which is the date of the next meeting, which will be Monday, the 23rd of September, 2024. And with that, I close the meeting, Joelle, and can we switch off the live stream? And thank you.